The war room on Veltar hummed with tension as Admiral Kesethak studied the holographic display floating above the crystal table. 12 red dots marked the locations where Zephyrian scout ships had vanished without sending even a distress signal. All 12 had been investigating the same solar system, a small backwater region that contained a primitive species called humans. "Show me the battle recordings again," Kesethak commanded, his scaled fingers drumming against the table's edge. The hologram shifted, displaying grainy footage from the few scouts that had managed to transmit data before their destruction. "War Commander." Vexenari leaned forward, his golden armor catching the blue light from the display. "These creatures fight with metal projectiles and chemical explosives. Their technology is centuries behind ours, yet they destroyed 3 of our reconnaissance fleets. The footage showed human ships, crude and angular compared to the elegant curves of Zephyrian vessels. Instead of energy weapons, they fired solid chunks of metal at incredible speeds. Instead of shields that could deflect plasma bursts, they used thick armor plating. It looked primitive, almost laughable, until the recordings showed a human destroyer ramming straight through a Zephyrian cruiser's shield matrix and tearing the ship apart with kinetic force. "They do not follow proper battle doctrine," muttered Sub-Commander Thelkari, his blue-scaled face twisted in confusion. "When outnumbered, they should retreat. When outgunned, they should surrender. Instead, they attack with greater fury." Kesethak had ruled 12 star systems for over 40 rotations, and never had he encountered a species that defied military logic so completely. The humans had no empire, controlled only 1 star system, and possessed technology that the Zephyrian empire had abandoned millennia ago. Yet they had fought his scouts with a ferocity that bordered on madness. "Perhaps they do not understand the concept of surrender," suggested tactical analyst Morveth from her position near the data terminals. "Our xenobiology teams believe they evolved from predatory pack hunters. This might explain their aggressive responses." The Admiral's tail swished with irritation. In all his campaigns across the galaxy, species either submitted to Zephyrian superiority or were crushed by overwhelming force. The humans seemed to fit neither category. They were too weak to pose a real threat, yet too stubborn to accept inevitable defeat. Meanwhile, billions of light years away, Commander Jake Morrison floated in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath him. The blue and white marble looked peaceful from this distance, but Jake knew that appearance was deceiving. Every major nation on the planet had gone to full military alert after the latest alien encounter near the asteroid belt. "Sir, we've got incoming transmission from Fleet Command," called out Communications Officer Amy Turner from the bridge. Jake pushed off from the viewing port and glided through the zero-gravity corridor toward the command center. Luna Station buzzed with activity as personnel prepared for what everyone knew was coming. The station had been built as a research facility, but recent months had seen it transformed into humanity's first line of defense. Mining equipment had been converted into makeshift weapons, cargo haulers had been fitted with armor plating, and every available ship had been pressed into service. Jake entered the bridge where his senior staff had already assembled. Pilot Lisa Chung sat at the helm controls, her fingers dancing across holographic displays as she ran flight simulations. Engineer Carlos Rodriguez hunched over technical readouts, modifying power systems to squeeze every ounce of performance from their equipment. Marine Sergeant Ryan Cooper stood near the tactical station, studying defensive positions throughout the solar system. "What's the word from Earth?" Jake asked as he settled into his command chair. Amy's fingers moved across her communication panel. "President Washington has authorized full mobilization. Every military unit is being repositioned, and civilian populations in major cities are being moved to underground shelters." "Any word from the outer patrol ships?" "Negative contact from Neptune Station for the past 6 hours. Last transmission indicated large energy signatures moving in from deep space." Jake felt his stomach tighten. Neptune Station housed early warning sensors that could detect incoming ships from several light years away. If they had gone silent, it meant the aliens were already in the solar system. Carlos looked up from his engineering station. "Sir, I've been analyzing the wreckage from those previous encounters. These aliens use some kind of energy-based shielding system. Our conventional weapons barely scratched them before, but I've been thinking about alternative approaches, such as kinetic impact, raw mass, and velocity. Their shields seem designed to disperse energy, but solid objects moving at high speed might punch right through. Lisa nodded enthusiastically. That would explain why the mining ships did better than our destroyers in the last fight. Those asteroid haulers were built to handle massive chunks of rock. Jake considered this information while watching the tactical display update with new contacts appearing at the edge of sensor range. Dozens of alien ships were moving toward the inner solar system in a formation that spoke of military precision and overwhelming confidence. Back on Veltar, Admiral Kesthak was finalizing his battle plans. The Crimson Talon fleet consisted of 60 capital ships, each one capable of reducing a planet to molten slag. Accompanying them were 300 smaller vessels and nearly 50,000 of the Empire's finest warriors. It was the largest force ever assembled for a single campaign. War Commander Vexnari will lead the assault, Kesthak announced to the assembled officers. These humans have proven resourceful, but they cannot stand against the might of the Empire. We will offer them one opportunity to surrender. If they refuse, we will demonstrate why no species defies Zephyrian authority. Vexnari stood and bowed, formally. It will be an honor, Admiral. How long do you estimate the campaign will last? No more than 10 solar rotations. Primitive weapons and desperate tactics cannot overcome superior technology and proper military doctrine. Once these humans witness our full strength, they will beg for the mercy of slavery rather than face annihilation. The other officers chittered their agreement, but Kesthak noticed that Morveth remained silent. The tactical analyst was still. Studying the battle recordings, her expression troubled. You have concerns, he asked. Only observations, Admiral. These humans seem to escalate their resistance in proportion to the threat they face. The larger our scout forces, the more violently, they responded. I wonder what they might do when confronted with our full fleet. Kesthak waved dismissively. Fear, most likely. When they see 60 capital ships descending on their homeworld, they will understand the futility of resistance. No species is foolish enough to fight a battle they cannot win. As the Crimson Talon fleet prepared to depart Veltar, neither Admiral Kesthak nor War Commander Vexnari could imagine that they were about to encounter a species that viewed impossible odds, not as a reason to surrender, but as a challenge to overcome. The humans had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting against superior predators, harsher environments, and each other. The concept of hopeless battle was not in their vocabulary. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of the Zephyrian Empire and announce to the galaxy that humanity had arrived. The first warning came from the Deep Space Monitoring Station orbiting Pluto, when sensor technician Bobby Clark detected massive energy signatures appearing at the edge of the solar system. His hands trembled as he counted the contacts on his screen, each one representing a ship larger than anything humanity had ever built. 60 massive vessels accompanied by hundreds of smaller craft, all moving in perfect formation toward the inner planets. This is Deep Space Monitor 1 to Fleet Command, Bobby transmitted, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. We have multiple contacts, repeat, multiple alien contacts approaching from galactic north. Count as approximately 350 vessels with 60 appearing to be capital-class ships. The message flashed across communication networks throughout human space, reaching every military installation, government facility, and civilian authority within minutes. On Luna Station, Commander Jake Morrison received the transmission while reviewing defensive plans with his senior staff. Time to intercept? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer would not be good. Communications Officer Amy Turner checked her calculations twice before responding. At current velocity, lead elements will reach Neptune's orbit in 18 hours. The main fleet will arrive at Mars' orbit in 72 hours. The numbers hit Jake like a physical blow. 72 hours to prepare for a battle against impossible odds. He looked around the bridge at his officers, seeing his own grim determination reflected in their faces. None of them had any illusions about their chances, but none of them suggested retreat either. On Earth, President Helen Washington stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the White House, surrounded by her top military advisors and civilian Leadership. The main display showed the alien fleet's approach vector, a red arrow pointing directly at the heart of human civilization. Options? She asked simply. Secretary of Defense Paul Mitchell spoke first. We have approximately 230 combat-capable vessels scattered throughout the system. Most are converted civilian ships with improvised weapon systems. Our total firepower is less than what intelligence estimates for a single alien capital ship. Diplomatic options? State Secretary Karen Adams shook her head. We've been broadcasting on all frequencies since the first contact incidents. They've never responded to any communication attempts. Their previous actions suggest they're not interested in negotiation. General Robert King, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward over the tactical display. Madam President, our conventional forces cannot win this engagement. However, we might be able to make them pay dearly for their victory. Every analysis of previous encounters suggests these aliens expect quick, decisive battles. They're not prepared for extended resistance. President, Washington nodded slowly. She had spent sleepless nights reviewing every scrap of intelligence about their alien visitors. The pattern was clear. Overwhelming technological superiority backed by tactical predictability. They followed rigid battle doctrines, used standardized formations, and seemed genuinely confused by human unpredictability. Implement Plan Defiance, she ordered. Send word to all fleet units and planetary defense forces. We're not running, and we're not surrendering. If they want Earth, they'll have to take it from us. At the edge of the solar system, War Commander Vexnari stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Inevitable Conquest, watching human space grow larger on the main display. The bridge was a marvel of Zephyrian engineering, with crystalline control, surfaces and holographic displays that responded to thought as much as touch. Status report, he commanded. All ships in formation and proceeding on schedule, responded his tactical officer. Long-range sensors detect human vessels moving to intercept, but their numbers are insignificant. We count fewer than 50 ships, of destroyer class or larger. Vexnari's mandibles clicked with amusement. 50 ships against his 350. The humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Given their previous behavior, he suspected both. Open a communication channel to all human vessels and installations, he ordered. It is time to offer them the opportunity to surrender, with dignity. The transmission that reached human receivers was broadcast on multiple frequencies and translated into dozens of Earth languages. Vexnari's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. Primitive inhabitants. Of this system, I am War Commander Vexnari of the Zephyrian Empire. You have violated Imperial space and destroyed Imperial vessels. However, the Empire is merciful to those who acknowledge their mistakes. Surrender immediately and submit to Imperial authority, and your species will be granted the honor of serving the Empire. Resist and you will be eliminated. You have one of your solar rotations to respond. The message reached Captain Steve Martinez aboard the patrol vessel New Frontier as he led a squadron of converted freighters toward Neptune's orbit. Steve had spent 20 years in the Earth Defense Force, working his way up from enlisted sailor to ship commander. He had never expected to find himself commanding humanity's first official diplomatic contact with an alien species. Communications, open a channel to the alien fleet, Steve ordered. Let's see if we can talk some sense into these people. His response was simple and direct. This is Captain Steve Martinez of the Earth Defense Force. We received your message and have discussed it with our leadership. We're not interested in joining your empire, but we're also not interested in unnecessary conflict. If you withdraw from our solar system, we'll forget this encounter ever happened. However, we will not surrender our freedom to anyone, regardless of their technological advantages. The reply that came back 30 minutes later carried a tone of incredulous anger. You dare to make demands of the Zephyrian Empire? Your arrogance will be your destruction. Prepare to face the consequences of defying Imperial authority. Steve smiled grimly as he shared the communication with his crew. Well, folks, I guess diplomacy is off the table. All ships, assume battle. Formation Chaos 7. Let's show these aliens what happens when they mess with Earth. Battle Formation Chaos 7 was exactly what its name suggested. Organized confusion designed to frustrate enemies who expected predictable tactics. Human ships scattered across a wide area, using asteroid fields and planetary debris as cover. Instead of maintaining neat formations, they moved in seemingly random patterns that made targeting difficult. The first skirmishes began near Neptune's orbit, when advance elements of the Zephyrian fleet encountered Captain Martinez's squadron. The humans had learned from previous encounters that direct confrontation was suicide, so they employed hit-and-run tactics that their ancestors had perfected in naval warfare centuries earlier. Lieutenant Ben Carter led 3 converted mining ships in an attack run against a Zephyrian cruiser, using Neptune's largest moon as cover. The alien ship's energy weapons could have vaporized his entire squadron, but the aliens seemed reluctant to fire when their targets were moving unpredictably through debris fields. "Target their engine section," Ben ordered as his ships accelerated toward the cruiser. Maximum kinetic impact, then break off immediately. The mining ships had been designed to move massive chunks of asteroid ore, and their reinforced hulls could withstand tremendous impacts. When they fired their cargo launchers at point-blank range, the solid metal projectiles punched through the cruiser's energy shields and tore into its hull plating. The Zephyrian vessel staggered under the unexpected assault, its elegant lines marred by ragged holes where human projectiles had penetrated its defenses. Warning lights flashed across its bridge as damage control teams rushed to contain hull breaches. "How is this possible?" demanded the ship's commander. "Their weapons are primitive chemical propulsion systems. Our shields should have deflected such crude attacks easily." His tactical officer studied the sensor readings with growing confusion. "Sir, the projectiles were moving at nearly 10% of light speed when they impacted our shields. The kinetic energy was enormous. Our shield matrix is designed to disperse energy weapons, not absorb massive physical impacts." Similar encounters were taking place throughout the outer solar system, as human forces employed tactics that the Zephyrians had never encountered. Instead of engaging in formal battle lines, humans attacked from unexpected angles, used civilian ships as decoys, and turned mining equipment into improvised weapon systems. On Luna Station, Commander Morrison coordinated the defense while monitoring reports from across the system. Each engagement revealed new information about alien capabilities and weaknesses, intelligence that would prove crucial in the battles to come. "They're good at what they expect," he told his staff during a brief lull in the fighting. "Energy weapons, shield technology, formal military doctrine, but they don't seem to know how to handle chaos, and they're not prepared for kinetic weapons, moving at the speeds we can achieve." Engineer Carlos Rodriguez nodded enthusiastically. "I've been analyzing the battle data, and I think I know why. Their civilization is old and stable. They've probably been fighting the same kind of wars for thousands of years. We're doing things they've never seen before because we've never had their advantages." The battle for Mars orbit became a nightmare that War Commander Vexenari would remember for the rest of his life, though that would prove to be shorter than he expected. His fleet had approached the Red Planet expecting another quick victory against inferior human forces, but what they found instead was a carefully orchestrated trap that defied every principle of civilized warfare. Commander Morrison had spent the previous 48 hours coordinating with every available human ship in the system, using Mars as the focal point for humanity's most desperate gambit. The planet's orbital infrastructure had been converted into a massive weapons platform, with mining stations launching asteroids at incredible velocities and communication satellites repurposed as targeting systems. "They're coming in exactly as predicted," reported pilot Lisa Chang from her position at the tactical display. 60 capital ships in standard Imperial formation, with escort vessels arranged in protective screens. "They're following their doctrine perfectly." Morrison nodded grimly. Predictability was exactly what they were counting on. "Signal all units, Operation Sledgehammer is a go." Hidden throughout Mars orbit, nearly 100 human vessels waited for the signal. They included everything from military destroyers to converted garbage scows, all armed with improvised kinetic weapons and crewed by volunteers who knew they were facing impossible odds. The plan was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. Instead of fighting the aliens ship to ship, They would turn the entire orbital zone into a chaotic battlefield where superior technology meant nothing. Technical Sergeant Katie Walsh crouched in the cargo bay of the transport vessel Freedom's Price, checking the improvised explosives her team had constructed from mining charges and industrial chemicals. Her job was perhaps the most dangerous of all, boarding enemy vessels and causing havoc from within. "Remember, people," she told her squad of 20 Marines. "These aliens think war is a gentleman's game with rules and protocols. We're going to show them what humans do when there are no rules." The first wave of attacks came not from human ships, but from the orbital infrastructure itself. Mars stations began launching everything they could accelerate: chunks of processed ore, construction materials, even decommissioned satellites. The projectiles were crude and unguided, but there were thousands of them, creating a deadly cloud of debris that forced the Zephyrian fleet to slow their advance. "What are they doing?" demanded Vexnari as his flagship shuddered under impacts from metal fragments. "This is not warfare, this is madness." His tactical officer's face showed the confusion that was spreading throughout the alien fleet. "Sir, they appear to be using their entire industrial infrastructure as weapons. Our sensors detect over 3,000 individual projectiles in various approach vectors." Before Vexnari could respond, the real attack began. Human ships emerged from behind planets, moons, and asteroid fields, accelerating at speeds that should have torn their crews apart. They had disabled their inertial compensators and artificial gravity systems, accepting the brutal physical punishment in exchange for maneuverability that their alien opponents could not match. Captain Danny Wright led the first assault wave. In his converted freighter Last Stand, his crew strapped into acceleration couches as the ship pulled 15 gravities in a spiraling attack run. Blood vessels burst in his eyes from the crushing force, but he kept his hands steady on the controls as his ship fired every weapon it carried at the nearest Zephyrian cruiser. The aliens had never encountered crews willing to disable their own safety systems for tactical advantage. Their own vessels were limited by the need to keep their crews alive and conscious, while human ships pushed far beyond safe operational parameters. The result was a series of attacks that came from impossible angles at incredible speeds, turning the orderly Zephyrian formation into chaos. Lieutenant Commander Nick Palmer commanded a squadron of modified fighters that had been fitted with experimental ram scoops, devices originally designed for collecting interstellar hydrogen. His pilots used them as weapons, scooping up debris from the battlefield and launching it at enemy ships like enormous shotgun blasts. "Target the ship with the biggest energy signature," Palmer ordered as his squadron dove through a cloud of metal fragments. "That has to be their command vessel." The attack on Vexnari's flagship came from 6 directions simultaneously, with human fighters weaving through their own defensive fire to deliver point-blank strikes against the ship's hull. The inevitable Conquest's shields flared and collapsed under the sustained assault, allowing kinetic projectiles to punch deep into the vessel's internal structure. But the most devastating attack came from Technical Sergeant Walsh and her boarding team. Using a technique developed in the asteroid mining industry, they had modified their transport to match the rotational velocity of the enemy flagship, allowing them to literally crash through the ship's hull and fight their way inside. Walsh found herself in a corridor filled with crystalline surfaces and soft blue lighting, facing aliens who stood 7 feet tall but moved with the fluid grace of dancers. The Zephyrians were obviously evolved for a different environment, and their elegant form seemed almost fragile compared to the compact muscular builds of her Marine squad. "Spread out and find their command center," she ordered. "Remember, we're not here to win, we're here to cause chaos." The fighting inside the alien ship became a running battle through corridors and chambers that seemed designed for aesthetics rather than defensive purposes. The Zephyrians were skilled warriors, but they fought according to codes of honor that included formal challenges and single combat. Walsh's Marines ignored such niceties, using explosives, ambush tactics, and coordinated team attacks that left their opponents confused and demoralized. Meanwhile, in the depths of the ship, Engineer Carlos Rodriguez was discovering something that would change the course of the entire battle. He had been analyzing captured Zephyrian technology for weeks, and the boarding action gave him his first chance to examine their systems in detail. Katie, get over here, he called as he studied a bank of control systems. Look at this. Their entire fleet is networked together through some kind of quantum communication system. If we can disrupt it, we might be able to blind their whole formation. Walsh looked at the alien technology with the eyes of someone trained to destroy things efficiently. Can you jury-rig an overload? Maybe. But it might take down this whole ship with us on it. Do it. We knew this was a one-way mission when we signed up. The explosion that destroyed the inevitable conquest also sent a cascade failure through the Zephyrian fleet's communication network. Suddenly, 60 capital ships found themselves operating independently, without the coordinated targeting and tactical data that had made them so effective. Each ship became isolated, forced to rely on its own sensors in a chaotic battlefield, filled with debris and unpredictable human attacks. Captain Steve Martinez chose that moment to implement the most audacious part of the human battle plan. Leading a formation of heavy cruisers, he accelerated directly toward the center of the alien formation at maximum thrust, broadcasting on all frequencies the battle cry that would become legend. Remember Earth. The charge of the heavy cruisers was an act of desperation that became an act of inspiration. Human ships throughout the battle zone took up the call, abandoning defensive positions to launch coordinated attacks against alien vessels that could no longer communicate effectively with each other. Commander Morrison watched the battle from Luna Station, coordinating supplies and reinforcements while monitoring casualty reports that climbed higher by the minute. Humanity was winning, but the cost was terrible. Nearly half of the human fleet had been destroyed or disabled, and thousands of brave men and women had given their lives to prove that Earth would not surrender without a fight. Status report, he called to his bridge crew. Amy Turner's voice was hoarse from hours of coordinating communications. Alien fleet is in full retreat toward Jupiter orbit. They've lost 23 capital ships and most of their escort vessels. Our remaining forces are pursuing but maintaining distance. And our losses? 47 ships destroyed, 38 damaged beyond immediate repair. Casualty count is still coming in, but preliminary estimates suggest over 8,000 dead or missing. The numbers hit Morrison like a physical blow, but he forced himself to remain focused on the tactical situation. The aliens were retreating, but they still outnumbered the surviving human forces. This battle was won, but the war was far from over. In the wreckage of his flagship, War Commander Vexenari drifted in a damaged escape pod, watching debris from the greatest military disaster in Zephyrian history spread across Mars' orbit. His empire's finest fleet had been shattered by primitive humans using improvised weapons and tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. His final transmission to Admiral Kesthak would be brief and devastating. Request immediate. Reinforcement. Human resistance far exceeds all projections. They fight like no species we have ever encountered. Standard Imperial doctrine is ineffective against their chaotic tactics. Recommend full strategic reassessment of this campaign. Admiral Kesthak stood before the holographic display in his war room, staring at the tactical readout that showed the remnants of his once mighty Crimson Talon fleet scattered across the outer reaches of the human solar system. The numbers were impossible to accept. 43 capital ships destroyed, over 200 escort vessels eliminated, and nearly 60,000 of the Empire's finest warriors dead or missing. Show me the recordings again, he ordered, though he had already watched them dozens of times. Each viewing only deepened his confusion about how primitive humans had achieved such a devastating victory. The hologram displayed scenes of chaos that defied everything Kesethak understood about warfare. Human ships attacking from impossible angles, crews operating under gravitational forces that should have killed them, and tactics that seemed designed by madmen rather than military professionals. Most disturbing of all were the human boarding actions, where small groups of warriors had disabled ships 100 times their size through sheer audacity and ruthless efficiency. War Commander Vexenari, recently rescued from the wreckage of his flagship, stood beside the admiral with his left arm in a regeneration cast. His report had been brief and troubling. Humanity did not fight according to any recognizable military doctrine, and their willingness to sacrifice themselves for tactical advantage made them nearly impossible to counter. They destroyed our communication network first, Vexenari explained, his voice still hoarse from smoke inhalation. Without coordinated targeting data, our ships became isolated targets. Then they used their industrial infrastructure as weapons, turning entire orbital stations into kinetic bombardment platforms. But their technology is primitive, Kesethak insisted. Metal projectiles and chemical explosives cannot overcome energy shields and plasma weapons. That is what we believed, Admiral. But kinetic weapons moving at near light speeds carry enormous energy. Our shields were designed to disperse energy attacks, not absorb massive physical impacts. The humans exploited a weakness we never knew existed. Meanwhile, in the depths of space near Jupiter's orbit, the surviving human fleet was undergoing rapid repairs and reinforcement. Ships that had been damaged in the Mars battle were being patched together with salvaged components, while new vessels arrived hourly from Earth's industrial centers. The victory had cost humanity dearly, but it had also proven that the aliens could be defeated. Commander Morrison found himself promoted to admiral after the previous fleet commander had been killed during the final assault on the alien formation. He now commanded over 300 vessels of various sizes, the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. The responsibility weighed heavily on him as he studied intelligence reports from across the solar system. "What's our status on the alien survivors?" he asked during his morning briefing with senior staff. Intelligence Officer Tracy Johnson consulted her datapad before responding. "We've recovered approximately 2,000 alien personnel from destroyed ships. Most are willing to cooperate in exchange for medical treatment. Their information has been extremely valuable in understanding their technology and tactical doctrine. And what have we learned? They're completely unprepared for asymmetric warfare. Their entire military structure is based on formal engagements between organized fleets using standardized tactics. The concept of irregular warfare is literally foreign to them." Engineer Carlos Rodriguez, who had survived the boarding action on the alien flagship, added his own observations. "Their technology is impressive but inflexible. Everything is designed to work within predetermined parameters. When we forced them outside those parameters, their systems couldn't adapt." The intelligence briefing was interrupted by an urgent communication from Earth. President Washington appeared on the main screen, her face showing the strain of leading humanity through its first interstellar war. "Admiral Morrison, we've received disturbing reports from our deep space monitoring stations. Long-range sensors have detected massive fleet movements throughout this region of the galaxy. It appears the aliens are calling in reinforcements from multiple star systems." Morrison felt his stomach tighten. The surviving human fleet was powerful by Earth's standards, but they had barely managed to defeat one alien battle group. If the enemy was marshaling forces from across their empire, humanity might face odds that even their unconventional tactics could not overcome. "How long before they arrive?" he asked. "Estimates vary, but our best analysis suggests 6 to 8 weeks. The good news is that we've had preliminary contact from some unexpected sources. Apparently, news of our victory has reached other species in this region, and several have expressed interest in forming mutual defense agreements." On the Zephyrian homeworld of Veltar, Emperor Kethanari convened an emergency session of the High Command to address the crisis that threatened the very foundation of the Empire. The loss of the Crimson Talon fleet was not just a military disaster. It was a challenge to Zephyrian authority that could inspire rebellion throughout their territory. "This cannot be allowed to stand," the Emperor declared, his ancient voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "If primitive humans can defeat our finest warriors, other species will begin to question our dominance. We must crush this rebellion before it spreads." Admiral Kesthak bowed formally before responding. "Your Majesty, I have already begun mobilizing the 2nd, 4th, and 7th battle fleets. Combined, they represent over 400 capital ships and the largest military force in our history. And you believe this will be sufficient? The humans achieved victory through surprise and unconventional tactics. Now that we understand their methods, we can adapt our own strategies accordingly. Overwhelming force applied correctly will resolve this situation permanently." But even as Kesethak spoke with confidence, He harbored private doubts about the wisdom of escalating the conflict. The humans had already demonstrated capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about warfare, and their apparent willingness to die rather than surrender suggested a level of determination that the Empire had never encountered. Back in the human solar system, civilian pilot Jenny Brooks was leading a training program that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, and even luxury yachts were being converted into military vessels, their crews trained in tactics that no formal military academy had ever taught. "Remember, people," she told a group of new recruits, "speed and unpredictability are our greatest weapons. The aliens expect us to follow their rules, but we make our own rules. If they think something is impossible, that's exactly what we should try to do." The training program reflected humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt and improvise under extreme pressure. Every lesson learned from the previous battles was being incorporated into new tactical doctrines, while engineers worked around the clock to develop weapon systems that could exploit newly discovered weaknesses in alien technology. On Luna Station, Dr. Alex Thompson had established a research facility dedicated to understanding captured alien equipment. His team had made several breakthrough discoveries that would prove crucial in the battles to come. "Look at this," he told Morrison during a private briefing. "Their energy weapons are incredibly sophisticated, but they operate on fixed frequencies. If we can develop broad-spectrum interference systems, we might be able to disrupt their targeting." "How long would that take to implement?" "Weeks, not months. The basic principle is simple enough. We're essentially talking about very powerful radio jammers tuned to specific energy signatures." Morrison nodded approvingly. Every advantage would be needed in the coming fight, no matter how small. The aliens were bringing their full strength to bear on humanity, and only innovation and determination would allow Earth to survive the assault. As both sides prepared for the larger conflict to come, the first battle's aftermath continued to send shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Species that had lived under Zephyrian domination for centuries began to whisper about the possibility of resistance, while others watched nervously to see whether humanity's victory had been a fluke or the beginning of a new era. The war for Earth's survival was entering its most crucial phase, and the outcome would determine not just humanity's fate, but the future balance of power among the stars. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled unchallenged for millennia, but humanity had proven that even the mightiest empire could bleed when faced with opponents who refused to accept defeat. In the cold vacuum between the planets, both human and alien, forces prepared for a confrontation that would dwarf the previous battle in scale and ferocity. The stakes could not be higher: the survival of human civilization against the full military might of a galactic empire that had never known defeat. The next phase of the war would test everything humanity had learned about their alien enemies and everything they believed about themselves. The final battle began not in space, but in the quantum communication networks that connected every Zephyrian ship across 3 star systems. Dr. Alex Thompson had spent weeks developing a virus that could exploit the rigid protocols of alien technology, and when the combined Imperial fleets dropped out of hyperspace near Pluto, his creation was ready to deliver humanity's first strike. Admiral Morrison watched from the bridge of the newly constructed battleship Defiance as over 400 alien capital ships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the energy of advanced shielding systems. The sight should have filled him with despair, but instead he felt a grim satisfaction. The aliens were still following their predictable patterns, still believing that overwhelming force could overcome human ingenuity. "Initialize Operation Chaos. Storm," he ordered, his voice carrying across communication networks throughout the solar system. The first phase of humanity's desperate plan activated simultaneously across dozens of locations. Hidden transmitters began broadcasting Thompson's virus on frequencies that matched Zephyrian communication protocols, while human ships scattered throughout the asteroid belt started accelerating toward predetermined positions. Emperor Kethnari himself had come to witness humanity's final destruction, his massive dreadnought positioned at the center of the Imperial formation. The ancient ruler had lived for over 3 centuries, conquering dozens of species and expanding the Empire's territory across half the galaxy. He expected this battle to be a formality, a demonstration of what happened to primitives who defied Zephyrian authority. "Begin the assault," he commanded. "I want their homeworld reduced to ash within 6 rotations." But as the Imperial fleets moved toward the inner planets, their perfect coordination began to dissolve. Thompson's virus spread through their communication networks like wildfire, turning their greatest strength into a critical weakness. Ships received contradictory orders, targeting data became scrambled, and the elegant formations that had dominated battlefields for millennia began to break apart. "What is happening?" demanded Admiral Kesithak, as his flagship's tactical displays flickered with false information. "Our networks are compromised," reported his communications officer, panic creeping into his voice. "All command frequencies are receiving interference. Ship-to-ship coordination is impossible." The chaos in the alien fleet was exactly what Morrison had hoped for, but he knew it would not last long. The Zephyrians would adapt to the communication disruption within hours, and when they did, humanity's numerical disadvantage would become overwhelming. "All units implement Sierra Protocol," he broadcast on secure human frequencies. "Remember, we don't have to win this fight. We just have to make sure they lose it." Sierra Protocol was the most desperate gambit in human military history, the deliberate sacrifice of Earth's entire orbital infrastructure to create a killing field that would trap the alien fleets. Mining stations throughout the system began detonating their fusion reactors, turning themselves into short-lived artificial stars that filled space with deadly radiation and electromagnetic pulses. Captain Danny Wright, who had survived the Mars battle despite impossible odds, led a squadron of converted freighters in the opening assault against the Emperor's dreadnought. His ship Last Stand had been rebuilt with experimental armor plating and kinetic weapons that could punch through energy shields, but he knew the attack was essentially suicide. "This is for everyone we've lost," he transmitted as his squadron accelerated toward the massive alien vessel. "And everyone we're going to save." The human attack came from all directions simultaneously, with ships emerging from behind planets and moons to strike at targets that could not coordinate their defensive fire. Pilot Lisa Chang led a formation of fighters through the expanding debris field created by the orbital detonations, using chunks of metal and ice as improvised kinetic weapons. But the most devastating attack came from an unexpected source: the civilian population of Earth itself. President Washington had authorized the conversion of the planet's communication satellites into a massive, directed energy weapon, turning Earth's entire telecommunications network into a planet-sized laser that could focus incredible amounts of power on a single target. The beam that lanced out from Earth's surface struck Emperor Kethanari's dreadnought with the force of a small star, overloading its shields and tearing through its hull like paper. The ancient ruler, who had conquered civilizations across the galaxy, died in the explosion that followed, taking with him the command structure that held the Zephyrian Empire together. Technical Sergeant Katie Walsh, now promoted to captain after her heroic actions at Mars, led another boarding assault against a Zephyrian battlecruiser. Her team had learned to exploit the aliens' psychological weaknesses, using tactics that seemed insane to species that valued order and predictability. "Remember," she told her Marines as they prepared to breach the enemy hull, "they think war has rules. Show them what humans do when there are no rules." The fighting inside alien ships had become a nightmare for the Zephyrians, who found themselves facing opponents that seemed to ignore conventional tactics entirely. Human boarding parties used explosives with reckless abandon, turned ship systems against their operators, and fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness. Engineer Carlos Rodriguez had developed portable devices that could interface with alien technology, allowing human teams to turn captured ships against their own fleets. Within hours of the battle's start, nearly 50 Zephyrian vessels were broadcasting human identification codes and firing on their former allies. The turning point came when news of the Emperor's death spread throughout the alien fleets. Without their supreme commander and with their communication networks in chaos, individual ship captains began making independent decisions about whether to continue fighting or retreat to safety. War Commander Vexnari, commanding from a backup vessel after losing 2 flagships to human attacks, found himself facing a choice that no Zephyrian officer had ever confronted: surrender or face complete annihilation. The humans had demonstrated weapons and tactics that made victory impossible, and continuing the fight would only result in more pointless deaths. "Open a communication channel to the human fleet," he ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "Request terms for cessation of hostilities." The transmission reached Admiral Morrison as he coordinated the final phases of humanity's counterattack. The human fleet had suffered terrible losses, with over 60% of their vessels destroyed or disabled, but they had achieved something that no species in the galaxy had accomplished. They had broken the Zephyrian Empire's will to fight. "This is Admiral Morrison of the Earth Defense Force," he responded to the alien surrender request. "We're willing to discuss terms, but they will include complete withdrawal from our solar system and recognition of human sovereignty over our space." The negotiations that followed were conducted through emergency communication protocols while both fleets attempted to rescue survivors from the massive battle. The final agreement was simple. The Zephyrians would withdraw from human space and establish no military presence within 50 light-years of Earth, while humanity would not pursue retreating alien forces or interfere with Imperial territory. But the consequences of the battle extended far beyond the immediate ceasefire. Word of humanity's victory spread throughout the galaxy with incredible speed, reaching species that had lived under Zephyrian domination for centuries. Within weeks, rebellions began breaking out across the Empire as subject races realized that their overlords were not invincible. On Earth, President Washington addressed the planet in a speech that would be remembered for generations. "Today, humanity has proven that freedom is not given by the strong to the weak, but taken by those willing to fight for it. We have shown the galaxy that no empire, no matter how mighty, can conquer a people who refuse to surrender their independence." Admiral Kesethak returned to Veltar with the remnants of the Imperial fleets, carrying news that would shatter the foundations of Zephyrian society. The empire that had ruled unchallenged for millennia now faced rebellion from within and enemies who had learned from humanity's example. His final report to the surviving Imperial leadership was brief and devastating. "The humans have achieved something we thought impossible. They have defeated superior technology with inferior weapons, overcome greater numbers with tactical innovation, and maintained their fighting spirit even when facing annihilation. They are not merely another species to be conquered. They represent something new in the galaxy, something that may change the balance of power forever." As the alien fleets withdrew from human space, leaving behind wreckage that would take decades to clear, humanity began the long process of rebuilding and preparing for an uncertain future. They had won their independence, but at a terrible cost that would be remembered by every family on Earth. The war had transformed humanity from an isolated species limited to one star system into a galactic power that other civilizations would approach with respect and caution. Earth's victory had not just saved human civilization, it had announced to the galaxy that a new player had entered the cosmic arena, one that would not be conquered, dominated, or ignored.